It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Hello, my fellow New York metropolitan fans. Welcome to a happy edition. It's good. We deserve a happy edition. A happy edition of Rico Brogna. The New York Mets sweep an abbreviated 2-game series. It was supposed to be a 3-game series. And then I guess tornadoes hit St. Louis. So they made their poor sucker fans sit there for 2.5 hours, sit through a rain/tornado delay. Then they decide we're going to postpone the game. We'll make it up sometime in August and go home and have a good day. And for us as Met fans, if you were at work today, maybe it's annoying when there's a 1:10 afternoon game in St. Louis. You didn't miss anything. For me, I didn't miss anything. I was going to do a radio show today. Did not miss a Met game. So thank you, Tornadoes of St. Louis. Hopefully it didn't harm anybody. And now the Mets and Cardinals will make up that game on August 5th. It's crazy. So because of this schedule, because of the fact that when you play a team outside your division, whether it's interleague play or it's a team in the NL Central or the NL West, you only go to that city once. That's a universal thing. It's not just interleague play. It's you play a team in the NL Central, you go there once. They also come here once. You play a team in the NL West, you go there once. They only come here once. Which means when you are playing that final game of a series, you're kind of desperate. If there's rain, you want to wait because then you got to go through the schedule and find that dreaded common off day. And they found that common off day, except for the Mets. It means they are going to fly from Anaheim to St. Louis to make up one game, then from St. Louis to Colorado to play 3 more games, and then from Colorado to Seattle. I mean, you talk about a pain in the ass road trip. That's what the Mets face in the first week of August. But here's the good news. That's in August. Who gives a rat's ass? What mattered is that the Mets bounced back. After the 3-game debacle, the disaster that was in Tampa, Florida, we needed to see this team. I don't care how ugly it was, and it wasn't pretty, and it was very scary. And the Mets do not blow teams out. Every game has to be a tooth extraction. But the Mets were able to bounce back. And I think in a lot of ways, look, I know the Cardinals are bad, but in a lot of ways, the Mets showed that guts that they've shown you throughout the season, the ability to fight back, the ability to take a punch in the face and respond. Now, I know the Cardinals are bad. I feel like I have to preface that numerous times. I know that Paul Goldschmidt is just an absolute abomination right now, but you still have to beat who's in front of you because here's the truth. Before we get into these 2 games, the Tampa Bay Rays were bad. Did that matter? Randy Arozarena was a mess. Did that matter when he had a game-tying home run on Sunday? So I don't care how much of a mess Paul Goldschmidt is. I don't care how much of a mess the St. Louis Cardinals in general are. The Mets desperately needed to win this series. That was my thought coming in. Now, obviously, it gets abbreviated into 2 games. They won the series. In fact, the New York Mets now have played 12 series this season. I've decided to keep track of this. It's the first time in my baseball life. I'm going to keep track about series results. So, Pete, I want you to guess. They have played 12 series this year. How do you think they've done in the 12 series they've played this season?
I think they've won 6 and they've lost 6.
You know what? You basically got it right, even though you didn't. As you recall, they just had a split against Chicago. But you were basically right. They have won 6 series. They have lost 5 series, and they had the 1 split. They are 5-5 in 3-game series this season. They have the 1 4-game split against Chicago, and now they sweep a 2-game series against St. Louis. Look at that. Look at Pete. I bet basically you got that right. Like I'm giving you the victory on that one. You nailed it.
I freaking nailed it, dude. Come on, give me something. I need a W like the Mets.
Yes, and we got 2 of them. Now let's go back to Monday night because Carlos Mendoza made a decision that I'm not mad at by any stretch, but I also wouldn't have endorsed it. And that is the idea of sitting Pete Alonso for the opener of this series. Pete's obviously a mess, or at least came into this series in a probably one of the worst slumps of his career. I guess if you look back at his struggles after coming back off the injured list last year, when he got plunked by Charlie Morton, I'm sure there was a stretch that was almost as bad, or at least it felt as bad. But Pete has been a disaster lately. And in general, my thought is run the guy out there every day. He's going to figure it out. But you want to give him a rest day? especially considering Pete never really takes rest days. I got no problem with it. The only issue I had is you look at this lineup and you're watching DJ Stewart play first base. But here's the beautiful thing about baseball. Whenever, and this is like something you could do if you do one of those FanDuel things where you bet individually on players. Here's a little trick. Anytime you're annoyed by somebody being in the lineup, somebody you don't want in the lineup, I guarantee you, not that it's going to work, but there will be an early at-bat in which it does work. And so in the top of the first inning of Monday night's game, they're taking on Kyle Gibson, a guy who I wanted the Mets to sign, if you remember. If you're a loyal Rico listener and you remember that from the offseason, he was one of my targets. Kyle Gibson looked like effing Christy Mathewson in the first two batters of this game. He struck out Brandon Nimmo. I think it was on 3 pitches, which is very rare. Usually Nimmo will at least give you a quality first at-bat, even if he's striking out. He struck out Starling Marte on 3 pitches. And I'm thinking to myself, are you freaking kidding me? Are we going to turn Kyle Gibson really into Walter Johnson? And then Lindor, to his credit, had an excellent at-bat, just an excellent long at-bat and drew a walk. And as DJ Stewart stepped to the plate as the cleanup hitter, the guy replacing Pete Alonso in the lineup, I thought to myself, I hate this, but you know he's going to do something good. It reminds me of that day when we were debating, I guess it was a week and a half ago now, about Vientos in sending him down or keeping him up here. And who do you send down? And the guy I suggested they send down was DJ Stewart. And you kind of knew it that night. What would DJ Stewart do? Oh, yeah, he did a game-winning 3-run home run. Because that's baseball Susan. And so DJ Stewart jumped on the second pitch he saw from Kyle Gibson and absolutely tattooed a double to left center field. And that was great because that was one of those first inning rallies that absolutely came out of nowhere. I mean, Kyle Gibson's mowing the Mets down first 2 batters, and then all of a sudden, good at-bat by Lindor, RBI double by DJ Stewart. They even made him work a little bit longer because JD Martinez drew a walk, and the Mets continue to trend. I know it hadn't translated into victories in Tampa Bay, but they've now continued to trend where they're finally scoring early, which is something they have not done earlier this season and something they did so well in 2022. So it's nice to see. It's encouraging to see. The other thing that was encouraging to see is that Sean Manaea was able to give you a quality performance. A quality performance. Got through the first inning, got bailed out on a great play by Jeff McNeil. As much as I kill Jeff McNeil, I got to give him credit. He made a great diving catch in left field. He got out of the second. He had a really efficient third and fourth inning. And all of a sudden, it looks like Sean Manaea is going to be able to go deep into this game. Pitched a good 5th inning. He is in absolute complete control. Mets get some runs in the 5th inning. Tomas Nido gets a base hit. It's amazing. Tomas Nido, got to give credit where credit is due, has not been atrocious. I have to admit it. Like, he has not been completely atrocious. He hasn't been a complete lost puppy at the plate. And the Mets had good at-bats. Starling Marte made contact, drove in a run with a ground out. Francisco Lindor to sacrifice fly. See, that's what I love to see. I love to see when you have second and third and nobody out like they had in the 5th inning of the opener of this series. I love to see a freaking team just score those 2 runs. You don't need to rip up a double up the alley. Just make contact and make good contact. Like, Marte's contact was so great because not only does he drive the run in by hitting a ground ball to second base, he advanced Nimmo to third base. And they were also able to take advantage of crappy Cardinals defense. Look, the Cardinals are a bad team right now. So when Lars Nootbaar made that error in right field, I'm thinking to myself, great. Good, they're a mess. Now take advantage of it. Sometimes you don't take advantage of it. But really, here's where Monday's game showed me those balls that we're talking about from this Met team. Sean Manaea runs into major, major trouble in the 6th inning. He puts the leadoff man on. He gives up an RBI double to Wilson Contreras. He walks Paul Goldschmidt, which you cannot do. I mean, Paul Goldschmidt is such a mess right now that walking him is unacceptable. And then Manaea gave us that little bit of a tease because he gets Arenado to fly out. He gets Dylan Carlson to fly out. And then unfortunately, he gives up that booming 2-run double to Ivan Herrera, which takes a 3-1 game and all of a sudden flips it now, and we have a tie baseball game. And that felt like an absolute kick in the groin because Manaea's pitching great all day. The Mets are able to give you quality at-bats and get to Kyle Gibson a little bit, take advantage of the Cardinal defense. You have a 3-0 lead in the 6th inning, and my expectation at that point is let's win this freaking game. Let's not have to worry about this. Let's get the 6th through with Minaya. Even if he gives up a run, it's not the end of the world. Hand it to the bullpen. You have a bullpen that's not fully rested, but you do have Edwin Diaz available, even though he pitched the previous day. You have Otto available. You assume you have Reed Garrett available. So get through the 6th if you're Sean Minaya, and I feel pretty good about winning this game. And he can't get through the 6th inning. Can't get through. I mean, he gets through the 6th inning because he gives up the double, and then Herrera runs himself out of the inning, which was completely unnecessary. But it's 3-3. And by the way, let me just tell you this about this whole 3-3 game. I was so effed up because I was taking some pain medication for my back issues. And by the way, I am one and done on pain medication. It is scary, scary crap. Like, it doesn't even make you feel like a human being. It makes you feel like you're in a fog. It's just terrible. So luckily I'm off it. It was a one and done thing. It helped. My back feels better, though I took a different drug for that. But whatever. Here's my point. In the 3rd inning of this game 1 of this series, I look to my wife, and I'm on DVR, so it's a little bit later, and I say, I'm done. I can't watch this freaking game. I'm exhausted. This drug is effing me up. So I go to bed. Now, usually when I go to a bed and I haven't finished a Met game, I'll wake up. And I've told this story before with the combined no-hitter where I'll wake up at 2 a.m. and I'll finish the game. Like, it's on my mind. I was so screwed up and so tired from this drug. I slept the entire night. I wake up in the morning, take my kids to school. Dude, it is now 8:30 in the morning. I have not finished this game. In fact, at this point, I think it was like in the 3rd inning. Like, I never even got to this part of the game that I'm talking about. I started watching it on DVR the following day at like 9 a.m. This was one of my greatest accomplishments when it comes to DVRing baseball, because I have gone through the entire morning. I haven't turned the fan on. I haven't checked my phone. And it's like, all right, I got the kids in school. Let me sit down and watch this game. And when Sean Minaya gives up the 3-0 lead in the 6th inning, I am effing pissed. And I'm not confident. But here was our hero. And this became a pattern in this brief series against the St. Louis Cardinals. Your boy, Pete, my boy, Brandon Nimmo. And look, whether you're Francisco Lindor or you're Pete Alonso or you're Brandon Nimmo, here's the truth. We may rip you. We may get frustrated with you. But those 3 guys specifically, notice I'm leaving Jeff McNeil out. Those 3 guys specifically, they will eventually get hot. They will. Look at the back of their baseball cards. They will play pretty much all the time. That's what they usually do. And they will eventually perform. Brandon Nimmo hitting a 1-out home run in the 7th inning off a relief pitcher, and Andrew Kittredge, who has been basically locked down this season, was very clutch. I could argue right now one of the most clutch hits the Mets have had all season long. It's at least in the conversation, brief conversation, because the Mets blowing a 3-0 lead in the 6th inning, and now it's the 7th. It's the later innings. You're facing one of their better relievers. You lose this game, and all of a sudden we're staring at a 4-game losing streak against 2 crappy teams. Very important home run by Brandon Nimmo. Very important home run by Brandon Nimmo. And then very important bullpen work. This bullpen has been a strength despite some of the meltdowns we've seen, specifically in Tampa Bay, whether it was Adam Ottavino with the walks or it was Edwin Diaz on Sunday with the home run to Orez Arena. Jake Diekman gets through the 7th. Adam Ottavino gives you the bounce back through the 8th. And then what was so encouraging from Edwin Diaz was not just saving the game in the 9th inning, but making it easy. Making it nice and easy. Because with a 1-run lead at 9:30 in the morning, I'm sweating this crap out. Now, Pete Alonso eventually comes into this game. Joey Wendell started the game at second base. We mentioned DJ Stewart was at first base. So eventually when Bader came in to play the outfield, Alonso comes in to play first base. He gets 1 at-bat in the 8th inning, and he hits a line drive to second base. Okay, all right. A little bit encouraging. Does it still count as a mental day? I mean, he got up. He played 3 innings in the field. He did hit the ball. He did have that 1 at-bat. But all right, Mets get a victory. They give Pete Alonso a rest day. Edwin Diaz bounces back from that just abysmal performance on Sunday, and we have ourselves a victory. Now, the real question is going to be in game 2 of this series, does Pete Alonso respond? And that's what I'm thinking about. Does Pete Alonso respond? First inning, he strikes out. Runner on first, 2 outs, top of the first inning. Pete Alonso strikes out. All right, 1 at bat. You know he's going to get a few more. Now, before we get back to Pete, Jose Butto. Jose Butto again gave you a very mediocre, impressive performance. That's how I would define what he did in game 2 of this series. And we've seen a lot of this over his last few starts. He gets off to just an absolutely abysmal start, gives up a leadoff home run to Brendan Donovan. Can't get much worse than that. Walks Lars Nootbaar, gives up a double to Contreras. But stop right there. I want you to stop right there. It is 1-0 Cardinals. They have second and third and nobody out. Butto has not gotten an out. He's throwing a million pitches. If in that moment, I tell you, he's going to get through 5 innings. And by the way, he's only going to give up 3 runs. I think we all would have signed for it, and I think we would have been stunned by it, thinking like, how is he getting through 5 innings? He gets through the first, gives up the 3 runs. I guess it could have been worse. But then in the second inning, puts the first 2 guys on base. So not only does Butto give up the 3 in the first inning, he puts the 8 and 9 hitter on base with a walk and a hit to start the second inning. And this is where Jose Butto went to work. And this is why I'm encouraged by Jose Butto. I think most of us are, despite, look, 5 innings, 3 runs is not great. I don't want to act like it was an amazing performance, but you got to look deeper at it. That's what we're doing right now. I look deeper at the fact that he got off to as crappy a start as one can have. And then out of absolute nowhere, when he struck out Donovan to get the first out of the second inning, he just went into cruise control. Got a couple of ground outs, got through the third inning, including a big double play, got a great defensive play by Brandon Nimmo, made a diving catch, but pitched a 1-2-3 fourth, got through the 5th inning despite a 1-out walk. And all of a sudden, it's like, wow, okay, 5 innings, 90 pitches, Jose Butto, that's all right. And I've said this about the back of the rotation. And look, Jose Butto is back of the rotation material. He is competing to remain in this rotation because the Mets have a lot of options, which we'll get to as this pod goes on. But 5 innings, 3 runs from your 5th starter is not the worst thing in the world. The only problem was the Mets were not showing a sign of life against Miles Michaelis. That was the problem. So they're down 3-0. And I think we're all pretty much cursing out the offense. And then our hero struck again. Brandon Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo was, without a doubt, the MVP of this 2-game series. They're down 3-0. They get a hit by McNeil. They get a cheap hit by Tomas Nido. Don't take that as a shot. It was a play that should have been made by Arenado, but whatever. They got 2 on. They got nobody out. And then Brandon Nimmo goes dead central. That was another, in back-to-back days, just another incredibly clutch home run. I don't know if that counts as a clutch home run when they calculate these stats. I guess it's not a late and close home run because it's only the 5th inning. But you're down 3-0. Your offense has shown you nothing. You're finally putting a rally together. That's a big home run to me. And then they just piled on Miles Michaelis. Piled on. Marte ripped the double off the wall. Lindor ripped the base hit. And then Pete Alonso. Now, speaking of Pete, I mentioned he struck out his first at-bat. He got robbed in his second at-bat. Hit the ball well, but a great play by Brandon Crawford. In this third at-bat, we may have seen the awakening of Pete Alonso. Rips a 2-run double. So Pete gives the Mets the lead. Later in the game, 1 inning later, it's a line drive right at the center fielder. Okay, good. Good hard contact. And then in the 9th inning, with the Mets up by, I guess we're up by 2 at this point, he, behind in the count, hits a home run to left center field. It is 1 game. It is a handful of at-bats. I acknowledge that. But I do feel now pretty good that Pete's about to awaken, that we're about to see Alonso get hot. And I say that not because I'm wishing it. I say it because good baseball players are good baseball players. You know, unless you happen to think Pete Alonso is just going to have a crappy season, which I don't think he's going to have. I'm not telling you he's going to have a career season. I tend to think Pete Alonso is just going to put up his average numbers. And by the way, his average numbers are not bad. Whether the average is up a little bit from last year, maybe below his career average, if you're telling me he's giving you 40 and 100, it makes the Mets a lot better. They need that. So maybe, just maybe, we are going to look back at Mendoza giving him that off day on a Monday in St. Louis. Maybe we're going to look at that. Maybe we're going to look at me saying I'm going to shave my beard to get him going. Maybe we're going to look at that. Or maybe we're just going to look at Pete Alonso was due to get hot, and now he's about to get hot. Remember what I said about Pete a couple days ago on the Rico? I said what was so discouraging is that it's not just that he's slumping, it's that he's not making hard contact. Sometimes we take it as an excuse when a manager says, no, I like the guy's at-bats. Oh, I like what I see. Dude, sometimes you hit in a bad luck. I'll admit that. Pete Alonso is not hit in a bad luck. Pete Alonso just hasn't hit, and he's been a mess. But we are starting to see him get base hits and hit in a bad luck. Because that Tuesday game, game 2 of this series, in his last 4 at-bats, think about what he did, last 4 at-bats in a row. A ground out in which he was robbed by Donovan, hit the ball hard. A 2-run double, a line drive right at the center fielder, and a home run. So it seems like Pete Alonso is going to bounce back. Now let's get to this bullpen. Because when the Mets explode for 6 runs in the 5th inning, they now still need to get 12 outs from this pen. It was interesting to watch how Carlos Mendoza was going to do this because without knowing specifically who was available, you certainly could make the assumption Edwin Diaz was not going to be available. And I'm not opposed to that. You know, as much as it drives us nuts, you got to be smart. You cannot burn these guys out in the middle of May. As important as certain games feel, and I admit, second game of this series against St. Louis, you can't blow it, but you also can't be stupid. So I'm working backwards now. And in this case, I'm not watching the game the next morning at 9 a.m. I'm just watching it like an hour after it was over, something a little bit more reasonable. He goes to Cole Sulser, who's one of those guys who's on that train up and down, up and down. He gives up the home run to Alec Burleson. All right, gets to the 6th inning at 6-4. He goes to Sean Reed-Foley, and I was surprised how quick he pulled Sean Reed-Foley. Sean Reed-Foley has been very, very good. For the most part, I know he issued that walk in Tampa Bay, but for the most part, he's been good. Gets the leadoff man out, gives up a hit and a walk in front of Ivan Herrera. Because remember, Contreras got hurt in that unfortunate incident, the catcher's interference in which JD hit him, and he's going to be out for a while, which sucks. And I was surprised how quickly Mendy took him out, especially with a short bullpen. But all right, he's going aggressive. He goes to Jorge Lopez, who after a base hit, gets through it. Bases loaded, 1 out, with Arenado and Goldschmidt coming up. With a 2-run lead, I don't know about you, I'm thinking the worst. Especially with a guy like Lopez, who while he's been good, I don't think he's really entered our circle of trust completely, right? But it shows you the mess that specifically Goldschmidt, but even Arenado are involved in. Like Arenado's got numbers that aren't downright pathetic, but they're not good. They're not Nolan Arenado numbers. So to the credit of Jorge Lopez, gets him to pop up, strikes out Paul Goldschmidt. Then he goes Reed Garrett. So here's where I was surprised. I thought with my clone Reed Garrett, especially when he had a somewhat efficient 8th inning, worked around the leadoff single, I thought he was just going to tell him, go get me the 6th outs. You know, we have one more game where you won't be available. Fine, final game of this series. Then we have an off day. So I thought, especially with the workload of Adam Ottavino and what he's had recently, because remember, he pitched the night before. 2 days earlier, he threw 1 million pitches in the meltdown against Tampa. I figured he was going to go 6 outs with Reed Garrett. He only goes 3, and he goes to Otto in the 9th inning. And dude, I was so freaking nervous about Adam Ottavino in the 9th inning, even with the 3-run lead, even with the Alonso insurance run. I did not feel good about it. Otto, for the most part, has been great, despite the recent meltdown in Tampa. For the most part, he's been great. He's been throwing strikes, but just everything about this, the workload, top of the order, there's no margin for error. He's got nobody available after Adam Ottavino. I mean, unless you want to tell me Adrian Hauser's available out of the bullpen, which I know he is, but really, you're going to go to him in that spot? He gives up the home run to Lars Nootbaar. I was worried, but I was like, okay, that's fine. I'd rather you give up a home run than walk a guy. Gives up a hit to Herrera, and then he effing walks Arenado on 4 pitches. I'm in full panic mode when he walks Nolan Arenado on 4 pitches because I know Goldie's getting older. I get that. But I think of Paul Goldschmidt the way I'm describing Alonso. Here's a really good baseball player. He's resurrected his career the last couple of years after it looked like he was on the decline a couple of years ago. And I'm just thinking he's going to get hot, kind of like a Rosarena. Kind of have that same vision. Now, look, they're different. A Rosarena is a much younger player. But my point is, a Rosarena is hitting 140. You know he's better than that. You just know. And you know he's going to get hot at some point. So when Otto is facing Goldschmidt, I won't lie to you. I'm not going to lie to you 24 hours later. I thought he was going to hit a bomb. I thought we were about to have another just brutal, devastating loss. And it was the opposite. I mean, Goldie is effing lost. What he swung at, that 1-2 fastball that was like 3 feet off the plate, I got no idea. And then even Alec Burleson, I was nervous. Lefty slugger against Otto. But look, to Adam Ottavino's credit, he strikes him out, Mets win, and they take both games. And I thought going into the finale, the game that I thought they were going to play, I looked at it as, I don't want to say a house money game, but all right, we won the series. If we can get the Sonny Gray, great. Hopefully Quintana bounces back. I actually looked at Thursday afternoon's game as, you know what? They bounced back. But luckily, they didn't play the game. I'm serious. I ain't bitching that they rained the game out. Selfishly, I didn't miss it. And then B, the Mets could use an off day. And it does feel like we've been saying that a lot. That does lead to one of the many emails I do want to read here on the Rico Brogna, ricob@gmail.com. And that email comes from Ian Nolan. Ian Nolan writes, this is going to sound very stupid, but one of the reasons I'm concerned with the bullpen usage, aside from the obvious, our starters fail to go deep in games, is the amount of close games we've been playing. All those close affairs have caused Mendoza to rely heavily on those key relievers, even more so than he should have to due to the starters' lack of innings. And then Ian does a great job. He actually sent like all of their recent games and how every game, it's crazy, but it's true. Every game, win or loss, is separated by 1 or 2 runs. Every single night. And look, off the top of your head as a Met fan, you already know that's the case. But it's so interesting to see it written down. Like, they do not have that easy game. Like, let's go through it real quick. 1 by 2, 1 by 1, lost by 1, lost by 2, lost by 2, 1 by 1, lost by 1, 1 by 2, lost by 2, 1 by 2. You got to go back to April 27th for a game that wasn't a 1 or 2 run game. It was a 3-run game. Night before that was a 2-run game. Then you have a few games on that West Coast trip that were quote unquote blowouts. The win against the Giants, the finale of the West Coast trip, they won 8-2. That was April 24th. That was 12 games ago. So it's a good point. Now, what are you going to do about it? I mean, there's nothing you could do about it other than what the Mets are currently doing, which is changing their bullpen frequently and changing the back end of their bullpen frequently. So what you may or may not know is that we talked about Cole Sulser. He's already gone. He already got sent down. And you know who came back? The Mets. This is one of the early things about David Stearns. Hoff was bragging. What was it like 2 weeks ago? You're like, I love how he just gets rid of guys. And
I loved it.
Rid of guys. He's just getting rid of guys to keep the roster flowing. He brings guys back all the time too, Pete.
I was like, Michael Tompkins, see you later. Johan Ramirez, see you later. Oh, they're back.
Well, Tompkins isn't back at least. Johan is. Yeah, so Johan Ramirez, who the Mets had Diaz, he's back. And that's the funny thing about this. That's why I would not rule out Michael Tompkins coming back later on too. These guys that don't have options, the Mets will send out to get fresh arms. This is what they've been doing all year. So if it means they lose somebody, like they have lost Michael Tompkins, like they did use Johan Ramirez, they send them out, they call up a fresh arm. Then if that guy becomes available again, they bring him back. The only certainties you have in this bullpen right now is Diekman, Reed Foley, because he's pitching well. I mean, if he wasn't, he could be on this list. Diekman, Reed Foley, Ottavino, Garrett, Diaz, Lopez. And I guess Hauser at this point, if you consider him a bullpen arm. So you've got the one or two spots that you can use to kind of freshen up the arms. Like, you can't make it become a blowout. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you can run up the score. It just is what it is. The Mets have been playing a lot of close games. The other issue is, and Ian mentioned it, and it's obvious, is guys just aren't going deep into games. But here's a caveat to the going deep into the games thing. We are so not used to guys going deep into games anymore, especially as a Met fan, but even as a baseball fan, that there was something noticeable that happened over the last week and a half. And you tell me, Pete, if this would cause you to not want pitchers to go deep into games. The Mets got back-to-back 8-inning starts from Luis Severino and from Jose Quintana. That was on the last homestand, as we remember. Both guys followed it up with two of their worst starts of the season. Coincidence? Or, maybe going deep into a game is not worth it if it's going to suck on the back end.
Let me ask you a question, because to me, I didn't think Severino pitched as bad as Quintana. Quintana got lit up. Severino had a little bit, me personally speaking, thought he had a little bit of bad luck in there, but he couldn't get out of some innings for sure.
He walked 6 guys in 5 innings, Pete. I mean, let's just be fair about that.
Well, he had to work around some things. But I think that Quintana, we know what he is. He's not an 8-inning guy at all. I'd like to see Sevy go a little bit deeper, because I'm sick of. Here's the thing: is unless you're going to call up somebody new every day, which I guess they have no problem with, you really do have to see a starter get 7 innings here and there. No?
Yeah. No, I kind of agree with you. I hope it's a coincidence. Like in Severino's case, remember, he had an extra day. He got pushed back when they allowed Christian Scott to make that start. Like, that was part of the appeal, was we're going to add a 6th guy to the rotation. So Sevy actually pitched with an extra days of rest. Quintana did not. Look, I think at the end of the day, you've got to manage to try to maximize the innings out of your starting pitching. I still think you have to do that. Now, if there's a common pattern of it, because it's 2 individuals that had it happen to them, it's not the same guy who's had it happen to him over and over again. You know what I mean? Like, if Quintana was supposed to start Wednesday, he didn't. He's going to start Friday against Atlanta. If he has another, amazing start, which would be great against Atlanta, and he goes 8 innings, and then let's say his next turnaround against the Phillies, he gets beat up again, I'd start to say, I wonder if this is really a thing. I don't know. I mean, it's weird that the Mets got those 2 great performances, and then both guys came out and were on different scales of bad. Like Severino, to Pete's point, he walked 6 guys. It was not a great start. He was in position to win, believe it or not, till the Met bullpen blew it. Like, Sevy was in line to get the victory until Diaz gave up the home run to Arozarena, which kind of shows you how overrated wins are. Quintana's finishing line, let me read it again. 2 2/3 innings, 10 hits, and 8 runs. Like, he's literally ruined his ERA with that performance. That's how bad it was.
Yeah, it ruined his ERA. It ruined my life.
It ruined your life. It was that bad, Pete.
It was a terrible. Yes, the optimism was there for hey, let's take a game, let's win a game, and it didn't work out. It was the exact opposite. My day gets ruined when the Mets get destroyed.
Yes. I've learned I'm healthier in life now. I get bothered when the Mets lose. I get angry when the Mets lose. I could argue it ruins my day. I think I may be with you on that. But I think I handle it a lot better than I did 10 years ago. Like, when I didn't have kids, I would just mope around my apartment. But now, I look at my sons and I'm like, all right, that makes me feel better. So that's the one positive. You'll love this. And I want Hoffman's take on this. And we got a couple of emails saying the same thing, by the way. So I want to give both of them credit. Dan and Fred Solomon. They both have the same point about Brandon Nimmo. I'll start with Dan. Dan writes, Nimmo-Lucian. That's what he wanted to say. Nimmo-Lucian. Maybe time to get our leader in RBIs into the middle of the order. He is way more of a power drive people and hitter now than a leadoff guy. The top of the lineup has felt way too stagnant for years now. Maybe moving some pieces around can actually get them to have a sustained stretch of good games instead of the frustrating, inconsistent crap we've put up since they've been together. And can we please stop acting like DJ Stewart needs to be in this lineup constantly? Finding multiple spots in the field for him when he can't play any of them just because sometimes he's the source of power. This franchise has always gotten way too attached to mediocre bad bench players, forcing them into the lineup way more than they should, and every one of them winds up getting exposed. Hi, Luis Guillorme, Wilmer Flores, and Daniel Vogelfat. Vogelfat, that's how he phrases it. So, Dan, the suggestion of Nimmo moving, Fred Solomon writes, Nimmo needs to hit lower in the lineup to take advantage of his power. Now, Fred supplies the solution because I get, hey, Brandon Nimmo's driven in a ton of runs. What are we doing here? Like, let's move him. I get it, especially the power that he's had recently. Brandon Nimmo is now up to 5 home runs and 25 RBIs. And to put that in perspective, we aren't quite at the quarter point of the season, but we're getting there. Brandon Nimmo's on pace to drive in more than 100 runs, which is kind of nuts from a leadoff hitter. It really is. So I get the idea of moving him to an RBI spot, but who would be the leadoff hitter? So Fred's option would be Marte 1, Lindor 2, Nimmo 3, Alonso 4, JD 5. I look, I don't love it. I got to be honest with you. I love the fact that Nimmo's been driving in runs and he does have a little bit of pop. I think that's the pop we saw last year. I think you're looking at a guy that's going to kind of settle in that 20-ish home run range, kind of there. But the quality at-bats he gives you as a first at-bat, either on the road or at Citi Field, doesn't matter. The 8-9 pitch at-bat, the ability to draw walks, the ability to get on base at such a high percentage. I just think those skill sets are more valuable as a leadoff hitter. I do. And I don't think the other options to lead off are that enticing. Starling Marte is not nearly the on-base guy that Brandon Nimmo is. Now, he can steal bases. That is a positive. We've talked about Lindor doing it. Talked about flipping Lindor to the leadoff spot, but then you take away his RBI possibilities. And Lindor, to me, has more power than Brandon Nimmo. Jeff McNeil's a mess despite the 2 hits in game 2 of this series. So are we really suggesting Jeff McNeil is a leadoff hitter? Absolutely not. So I think my issue with the suggestions or disagreement, it's not like I have an issue with you. My disagreement with the suggestions is that I just don't like the alternatives.
Oh, sorry. Press the wrong button. Here's my problem.
Go ahead.
Here's my problem, okay? Yeah. I look at Brandon Nimmo. Do you know how many times he's had 90 or more runs scored? 90 or more times he's scored in a season.
Go ahead.
Do you know how many times?
No, I have no idea. What's the answer?
Once. He scored.
But is that on him or is that on the guys driving him in? I mean, that runs is a stat that's based also on your teammates.
But if you're a leadoff hitter and this is one thing I have a gripe with. If you're a leadoff hitter, you get on base, but you don't really know how to go. Dude, watching him round, I forget what game it was, where he went from first to home. I'm like, that can't be our leadoff hitter. That can't be. I know he's faster than he looks, but he looks unconventional.
So who would you lead off? You lead off Lindor?
I'd lead off Lindor. Lindor, the past 2 seasons, he scored 98 runs and 108 runs. He didn't bat lead off. He still found a way to score.
I think the finding way to score thing is a little overrated. Like I agree he doesn't steal bases. I mean, he clearly doesn't. That's not something I would argue with. But I think that looking at the runs scored stat, it's based a lot on your teammates. Your teammates have to drive you in. I mean, how many times has Brandon Nimmo been standing on third base or standing on second base, and because of a massive Pete Alonso slump, he's just not driving him in? Whose fault is that?
Okay, but also, if Nimmo is not trying to steal base, how many times does somebody ground to a double play because Nimmo hasn't advanced himself to second base?
But the other options that you have, like Lindor, I would agree with you that if there was going to be somebody else, like if you were going to take Nimmo out of the leadoff spot, I'm not opposed to the idea of Lindor, but I also think you're taking away Lindor's strength of being an RBI producer. I just don't love it. I don't love it with the pieces they have on this roster right now to take him out of the leadoff spot.
Well, I will say this much, and Joe DeMeo was on WFAN Daily with Sal Licata the day, a bonus episode, and it's not this year, but he told us who the leadoff guy is going to be.
Jet Williams.
Exactly.
No, and look,
that solves the issue.
Yes, we talked about this before the season when you were pitching Brandon Nimmo batting ninth, and I said to you, Pete, in a year or two, maybe that'll be the case. Or not ninth, but you know what I mean? Like Jet Williams, the problem is, and this has been one of the negatives of this 2024 season, we're 36 games into the year. They're 18-18. The ups and downs of the season, sure, the roller coaster. The negative has been position players in the minor leagues that we were excited about. Like Drew Gilbert's on the injured list with a hamstring issue. Jet Williams was not hitting at AA, got off to a terrible start, and he has a wrist issue. So Jet Williams and Drew Gilbert, two guys that I think we thought had a chance to be at this major league roster at some point this season. It's not happening. Like the only chance we have of seeing those guys at the major league level in like barring something crazy is like a late September call up because A, the bad starts, and then B, they're injured. Like Drew Gilbert's dealing with a hamstring issue. No idea when he's going to come back. I saw Jet had a cortisone shot in his wrist. Who knows when he's going to be available? So those two guys who both could have been up here, maybe becoming everyday players, and maybe eventually being that leadoff hitter of the future, they're not close. Luis Angel Acuna hasn't really hit. So really the positive from the system has been the pitching. It's been the fact that Christian Scott's already here. Blake Tidwell's pitching very, very well. But the position players that we were all excited about, that could be the answer as the long-term leadoff hitter, it's just not happening this year. By the way, I mentioned that the Mets are 18-18. That's their record. Okay, 36 games into the season, they are sitting right at 500. And I do think there are a lot of people who think, well, that's who they are. What we've seen so far, that's who the Mets are as a 500 team. I will tell you, if you look at the standings in the National League right now, and to me, it's never too early to look at the standings because you're trying to figure out where things are going to fall. Do you realize that the New York Mets at 18-18 have a record good enough to be a wild card team? Is that not insane to you? 18-18 is good enough.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, dude, we talked about this at the beginning of the season. I said they're a 500 team, which in today's baseball, it's mediocre, but mediocre can get you in the playoffs.
It could. Now, look, I would think that it's going to take more than that. I remember when they first announced this playoff format of the 3 wildcard teams, I went back and looked over the last decade. How many times would this amount of wins get you in? There were years where 79 wins would get you in, or 81 wins would get you in. I don't think that's going to be the case because I think that Arizona at 17-20 will eventually get to 500 or above. I expect that the Padres, who are 20-20, will be above 500. Watch out for the Pirates, especially with them finally calling up Paul Skeens. Like, you never know. And I do think the Cubs will come back down to earth. I know they've done a very good job, especially with their injuries at 22-16. I think they'll come a little bit more back to us. But here's the truth. Roller coaster ride of 500 at least has you in a playoff race. May not have you in the playoffs, but it has you in a playoff race. Let's hear from Dustin at thericob@gmail.com. A tale of two M's. Let's look at some facts involving Jeff McNeil. You mentioned his sub-700 OPS since the contract. He has admitted he has always liked golf over baseball his entire life and only played baseball in college because he was good at it. Hot-headed. When the stories come out in the offseason about this Met team being the least hardworking team that Tommy Pham has ever been a part of, excluding Lindor, Nimmo, Alonso, and I think Eduardo Escobar, who does that leave left as far as non-mercenary players on this team? I think Beningo used to say all the time of players who mail it in when they get their contract, and I usually think he was off on most of those assessments. McNeil sure feels like that is the case, and he's got his eyes on playing pro golf when his contract is up. It's funny, Dustin, before I get to the Mendoza part, I'm starting to feel the same way. I really am, because I give players the benefit of the doubt, like we've talked about with Pete Alonso, even with Paul Goldschmidt. The McNeil struggle is going on for a long time now, and it all coincides with him getting that new contract. So he better wake up. That's the bottom line, because fans are going to start to turn on him. I think with homegrown guys, it takes more time for us to turn on him, but Jeff McNeil's got to start hitting. As far as Mendoza's concerned, Mendoza, for all the ups and downs we have had thus far, I think Mendy has done a very good job. I want to give him credit because we inevitably kill him this year. I know it's easy to say he's done a great job when the bullpen's been great, but I can count on one hand I've thought he's made a bad pinch hit or move or lack thereof. Maybe only one time when he goes to the immortal Michael Tonkin in the multiple games he lost for us. Other than that, the players seem to like him. I don't kill him multiple times a week for bullpen moves, and I truly feel we got something with this manager. I know we're a month and a half in, but I'm sure you'd agree he's been a positive for this team, and given our recent history of brutal managers, I am satisfied. I like a lot of what I've seen from Carlos Mendoza. I remember before he started, he did an interview. I think it was the Serby interview that still runs in the paper, in which he interviews somebody, and he interviewed Mendoza, and one of the answers that jumped out at me was, what kind of manager are you? Like, what's your deal? And he said, I blend analytics with feel for the game. And when I saw that, I rolled my eyes with skepticism because I feel like every manager now says that. They admit analytics play a big part of the game because, of course, they do. But they always try to say, yeah, feel for the game still exists. And a lot of managers don't have a feel for the game. It's literally by the numbers. Carlos Mendoza has clearly managed with a feel for this game. He has clearly made decisions that sometimes are against what the numbers are telling you, but maybe that look in a player's eye is telling him something different. So I like that about Carlos Mendoza. I think he's been very lucky with the bullpen. I do, because I think a lot of you guys, myself sometimes too, would bitch about not using your best relievers in games that we deem important. And the Mets have seemed to survive those games when Edwin Diaz isn't available, when he's going to Jorge Lopez in a big spot. So when your bullpen is effective, and the Met bullpen has been effective, it does not even clean up the warts, but cleans up our criticism of what we would be mad about. But yeah, the early returns on Carlos Mendoza are very good. And even this Alonso thing, like, he gives him an off day, and at least in his first game back, he's showing signs of breaking out of it. We did see Harrison Bader, and I appreciate Bader saying this, coming out being clean and saying, I don't like the fact that I'm not playing. And that Carlos Mendoza tries to tell the guys a day ahead of time if they're going to play the next day. And Bader admitted he doesn't want to know because he won't be able to sleep at night if he knows he's not in the lineup. And lately, there have been days in which we haven't seen Harrison Bader. I think it was game 2 of this series. Let me look at my scorecard. Yes, game 2 of this series.
DJ Stewart played left field and Nimmo played center.
There you go. And that was clearly an offensive move. That was clearly thinking, all right, against a righty and Miles Michaelis, I'm going for the offense with DJ Stewart over the defense for Bader. And you know why I don't hate that? I know you're going to argue with me, Pete, because you love Bader, and that's fine. I like Bader too. I don't want you to think I don't. But when they signed Harrison Bader, my initial thought was, and you can go back, look at the archives of the Rico, I said, this should be a platoon between him and DJ Stewart. That's honestly the way I looked at it. So while, yeah, DJ Stewart is not, all world. I mean, truthfully, DJ Stewart and Harrison Bader should eventually be replaced by a top outfield prospect. But as we talked about earlier, that's not happening anytime soon. When you look at the kind of hitter Bader is, it's not the worst thing in the world to have DJ Stewart's bat in there every once in a while. And then, like we saw in game 2 of this series, get him out of the game in the 5th inning for Bader, which is what he did. By the 5th inning, DJ Stewart was out for Bader.
And I get that, right. And what did he do? He went a whopping 0 for 3. DJ Stewart is turning into the, a little bit better Daniel Vogelback because he does actually swing the bat and does actually hit a home run here and there. I like the DJ Stewart story, but it's not the same it was last year. And to be fair, like Harrison Bader is, besides JD Martinez, who's now batting, I think, 296, Harrison Bader has the highest batting average on the team. Okay? Why is he the one who's getting sat for, offensive production, who's for a guy who's batting 200? That
because you're just because Pete, you're just looking at batting average. You're not looking at on base. You're not looking at pop. You're not looking at OPS. You're literally looking at one effing stat that helps your boy.
Because here's the thing is, I'm a purist. I like guys that can hit the ball and they get on base. Like that to me helps. If you're gonna strike out, if you're gonna make it out, to me, it's not productive. You make it make it productive.
What do you want to do with this pitching staff? Mendoza has not specifically said what the plan is. Like, Adrian Hauser was moved to the bullpen temporarily for the series in St. Louis. The Mets are about to begin a stretch in which they don't have off days. They're dealing with back-to-back off days. Good for them. But once they begin the series against Atlanta, they go 3 in a row against the Braves. They go 4 in a row against the Phillies. It's weird. 2 of the games are at City. 2 of the games are in Philadelphia. And then they keep playing. Like, looking at the schedule, I got to see how many days in a row they actually play. But they've got the 4 games, the 3 games against Atlanta, the 4 games against Philadelphia. So that's 7 in a row. Then they've got 3 games in Miami. That's 10 in a row. And then 3 games in Cleveland. That's 13 in a row. So they're about to engage in a stretch in which they play 13 times in a row. And then after that, off day, they play 3, 6, 10, 13 in a row again. So they are about to play, I'll do the math, 26 games in 28 days. A lot of baseball. They've got Tyler Miguel, 2 starts into his rehab career, if you will. He's pitched incredibly well. I think he's going to make 1 more rehab start over the weekend, and then they're probably going to call him up. I guess they'll go slower with David Peterson. Forget about Senga, because that's still, weeks and weeks away. When he starts making rehab starts, we'll have a discussion about it. Christian Scott's got to stay in the rotation. Jose Budo is earned remaining in the rotation. Minaya should stay in the rotation. Quintana's obviously in the rotation, and Sevy's in the rotation. So you've already got 5 guys that, to me, need to take the baseball every 5 or 6 days. Do you insert Hauser back in as the 6th man? Do you keep him in the bullpen and then insert Tyler McGill as the 6th man? Or do you have Hauser and McGill both out of the bullpen and you run with the 5-man rotation we just talked about? Those to me are the options. What do you do?
So, okay, I don't know if you've noticed what they've been doing in Philadelphia with Spencer Turnbull. He hasn't been healthy for a few years. I think he hasn't pitched more than 56 innings. He has gone already at 5 or 6 starts, 5 innings. And then they said, you know what, we want to monetize your innings. We want to lower it, but we want to monetize your value. So we're going to make you a long relief man. So we're going to get you 2 innings to kind of piggyback off other guys. I kind of like that strategy. Don't belabor Adrian Hauser. Don't say, go out there and give us 5 innings. You know what? If you got an inning or 2 today and we can piggyback you with a Tyler McGill that I'm not sure if he's going to be able to really go more than 4 innings because he struggles too. Maybe do a combo. I'm down with that. As a 6th man right now, 2 guys be that 6th man. That maybe saves your bullpen too.
So the only negative to that, and obviously you could do that now, especially in the DH era, because that's something that's tough to do with the pitcher hitting and the pinch hitters, to have, kind of 2 bulk guys, if you will, excuse me, 2 guys get 3 or 4 innings out of him, especially because that's been McGill's career. Unfortunately, his career has been, he can't really go more than 4 or 5 innings because sometimes he throws so many pitches, gets into so much trouble, puts so much traffic on the bases, then gets out of it. You are taking up too many valuable roster spots. I mean, just think about what you're doing. You've got your 5 men in the rotation we just talked about, and I think we mostly agree those 5 guys deserve to remain in the rotation. Quintana, Severino, Minaya, Christian Scott, who we're all excited about pitching again Saturday night or Saturday afternoon at Citi Field, and Jose Budo. That's 5. Plus the 2 guys that are going to make up the 6th spot in the rotation. That's 7. That only leaves you 6 relievers. And that's the problem.
I forgot, because this is just temporary, because when Kodai Senga comes back, you just cut them both.
Well, that's the thing. I kind of want to see what McGill is as a reliever. Like, I think we've already realized that Tyler McGill back of the rotation. Yeah. Is he an acceptable 5th starter? Sure. Is he an acceptable 6th starter? I guess. But I'm looking at it as eventually, assuming everybody can get healthy, which is, always a tough assumption to make, I want to see what kind of reliever Tyler McGill is. I'm just curious. So I would bring him back. I would reinsert Hauser back into the rotation. As much as people hate that, I'm sorry. It may be temporary. Because look, if everyone else in that rotation continues to pitch well and then Kodai Senga comes back and is healthy, Hauser's the odd man out. There's no doubt. So I'm drawn in by McGill coming up, kind of replaces that Johan Ramirez spot in the bullpen because eventually he will be replaced. He'll be here for a week, then he'll be gone. Let's see what McGill's like as a reliever. Could use him as a long man. Could have those moments where you see what he's like in a short situation. And I think Hauser goes back into the rotation because I do like a six-man rotation. I think right now, especially with this Met rotation, like the one that they have now, I think it makes complete sense to have a six-man. I wouldn't go back to a five-man. I just don't think it's necessary. I think when you have like legitimate aces, it makes sense to have a five-man rotation because you want to maximize the amount of times that great pitcher pitches. The Mets do not have an ace. They don't. And I think you want to protect your arms too, especially a young guy like Christian Scott, who you got to protect the amount of innings he's going to throw.
But the one thing that has to go with this, and there's a caveat to this, if you're going to tell me we have a six-man rotation, then to kind of make that bullpen work where you don't need an extra guy in the bullpen, you can save a guy for on the bench. The pitches have to go longer than 5 innings.
Yes.
If you got a guy that's going every it's a six-game rotation, and you're only getting 4 to 5 innings out of your starting pitchers, well, this is not effective.
I always thought two things about six-man rotation in theory, and it's a theory because I don't know how many teams would do this. Number one, they either go deeper into games, like you just suggested, or on their third day, they're available out of the bullpen. That'd be my other option. So it's kind of like your throw day, not long, they're not pitching a lot, but maybe you get them on their third day to pitch out of the bullpen. So we'll see what they decide to do, but it's going to be an interesting weekend. The Atlanta Braves are coming to town. The Mets did a great job in Atlanta. They shockingly won that series. We will get Jose Quintana trying to bounce back against Charlie Morton. We will get Christian Scott on Saturday against Max Fried, who's been pitching a lot better. That's a hell of a pitching matchup. And then on Sunday, it's Bryce Elder against Luis Severino. And we got Sunday Night Baseball. How about that on Sunday? So that's special on Mother's Day.
We also have one other major thing going on this weekend, which for the listeners, I'm not sure if it's going to hit as much as Evan Roberts. And I know that you, how much this goes to heart, but the new Planet of the Apes is coming out, my man.
Oh, you don't think I know about this? I mean, I have already bought tickets. I've already bought tickets because I got my oldest son, Jet, into Planet of the Apes. I did not force him. I showed him the original 1968 Charlton Heston. He loved it. We ended up watching the entire series. I don't know how many people have seen the 5 movies that came out that followed it. Not all of them were great, by the way. And I just showed him Rise of the Planet of the Apes. We were watching Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. And then the last movie we got to watch is War of the Planet of the Apes. And then, yes, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. So Saturday night. That's part of the reason we're not going to the game Saturday. We're going to the game Friday and Sunday. Saturday, that's different. That's Rise. Not Rise. That's Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. So, yes, I'm very, very excited. Very, very excited. But it should be a fun weekend. I would think the Mets are going to draw well this weekend. I think the weather should be reasonably good. Maybe not Friday. Friday's supposed to rain, but you're playing the Braves. It's May. I don't know. Maybe 35,000. At least I hope 35,000. But should be a good test this weekend for the Mets, the Braves, and then 4 games against the red-hot Philadelphia Phillies. I have no delusions about the Mets winning the National League East, but they are 7 games out. So, and they're 5 games behind Atlanta. So if you want to make up some ground on that, now would be the time. We appreciate you listening and downloading. You can email the pod anytime, thericob@gmail.com. Always leave us a voicemail as well at 725-222-8699. And I promise you, we will listen to your voicemails next time around. Okay? So get them on in. Good opinions, bad opinions, hate me, love me, doesn't matter. 725-222-8699. Let's go, Mets. Thank you for listening to another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.